Going on, everyone? JohnMatrix here. So we took a look at part one of Brickys Every Single Warhammer 40k faction explained, and today we're going to look at part two. So in part one, he mostly just went over more of the sub-factions of the Imperium, really. Some of the stuff I already knew, but a lot of it I didn't know. Like, I didn't really know much about the Battle Sisters at all. And I mean, the the idea of going into battle and, you know, seeing churches being, you know, drop potted from orbit from these giant battleships and having these armor-clad women spell out with bolters and flamethrowers and stuff with hymns, you know, being played from orbit is an interesting. It's a very interesting and intimidating, you know, imagery. The Custodians I knew a little bit about. He explained a little bit more about them and, you know, how they're basically, you know, the bodyguards of the Emperor and Terra. The Grey Knights I didn't know much about. They sound like a tabletop faction that I would be pretty interested in playing. They would probably be tied up there with the Space Wolves for the faction that I'd be interested in playing. I think from the two videos of his that I've watched, the part one of the Every Single Faction Explained, and then the Space Marine Legions in a Nutshell, both of those, from both of those videos, the faction so far that I'd be most interested in playing would be the Space Wolves. That'd probably be number one. The Grey Knights are probably tied with them, though. I think the Grey Knights is probably up there, tied with the Space Wolves for the those would be the two factions that I'd be probably, if I were to start off getting into tabletop now, those would be the two factions that I would get into. Close behind would be the Nurgle Space Marine Chaos faction. They sound pretty dope. And then also the Raven, like kind of more long-range sniping class faction of the Space Marines sound pretty dope too. And then close behind them would be the Tzeentch Chaos Space Marine faction. They sound pretty dope. The whole, like, I very much am into, like, battle mage archetypes. I guess the best way to explain it, or the easiest way to explain it, would be like Jedi or Sith. You know, things that are good at melee but also have spell and range capacity. Like, you know, I haven't played a ton of D&D, but in the D&D that I have played, my favorite character that I've made was Hexblade Warlock Paladin. So, you know, having the versatility of, you know, using Eldritch Blast at range and having, you know, some spells for utility while, you know, still, you know, being proficient in melee and, you know, etc. Those are the kind of archetypes that I like. And that sounds kind of like somewhat of what the Tzeentch and Grey Knight, you know, the Tzeentch Chaos Marines and the Grey Knight faction kind of sound like. You know, the Grey Knights are very high level, high class psychers, but also they're Space Marines. They have all of the stuff that Space Marines can do with their armor and melee and bolters, but they're also high level psychers, so some spell casting. And then also the Tzeentch guys are that way. They're very, you know, so that kind of archetype always interests me. So those are the factions so far from what I've seen that I'd be interested in. But I think in part two here today, he's going to probably be going into more of the alien Xenos, you know, factions. And I don't know a ton about them. I think from what I know, the factions that I know of are the Eldar, the Orks, the Tyranids, the Necrons, and the Tau. Though I don't know if there's more or less of them, and I'm assuming all of them have sub-factions similar to the Space Marines. And of course there's the Chaos, you know, Chaos Demons, and they have their own things along with the various Chaos Space Marine stuff. Like the Eldar I know are basically like space elves. They're one of the oldest races, and they're very extremely, you know, technologically advanced race. That's pretty much all I really know about them. I don't really know how they're created, why, you know, what they're all about. I know that they created Slaanesh. I'm not sure how that happened exactly, but I know, like, Yeah, I just know they created Slanesh. I know that at some point in time they kind of like basically hit the pinnacle of like civilization, and then they kind of like started to regress, and something with their regression like created that, you know, chaos god. The Tau, I know, are kind of the most diplomatic faction of Warhammer 40k. They almost kind of don't really fit into Warhammer 40k, I guess, if you want to say it that way. They're more about, you know, they're willing to negotiate, and they're not just like at a drop of a hat they're just gonna fight. You know, they're willing to incorporate other cultures and other belief systems into their way of being, I guess, because I guess it furthers their whatever. I don't really know much more about them than that. The Tyranids, all I really know about them is like the Zerg from StarCraft 2 are based off them. I don't know really how many or any sub-factions there are, but they're basically just like, you know, they're just about consuming and evolving, essentially, is all I really know about them. And I don't really know much about the Necrons at all, other than they're like the oldest race in existence, and they're very highly technological and very deadly. That's about it. Orks, I don't really know much about them either, how they came to be. The only thing I really know about the Orks is like, somehow, some way, like with their technology, they just like make it work. They're just like, they just believe it works and it works. Like, that's kind of really all I know about the Orks. I don't really know much anything else about them, and the only thing I know is they just like to fight and kill. Like, that's just it. So yeah, so I'm hoping to see, you know, what more he gets into with the alien factions and what more I learn about them today. So let's just get right on in it.
Hey all, this is part 2 in a 2-part series on the Warhammer races. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, we do the Imperium of Man. You
did it
down in the description.
Homework done.
I recommend you watch that to get context for this episode. If you already have, go ahead and keep on watching. So after an entire episode of nothing but humans, we can now talk about chaos, which involves humans again, but a little bit less. We also got demons and shit.
Okay, all right, we're getting into the demons.
What? Like hard, Nick. So as I mentioned.
So, I don't really know a ton about the demons, the chaos demons, but I do know there's kind of like, they're almost like a force of nature, and there's like a duality to the chaos demons. Like, I know there's Khorne, Tzeentch, Slanesh, and Nurgle, and they all represent specific things, but there's also like Khorne is about like murder and fighting and killing, and that's basically like his shtick. But he's also about honor and like overcoming challenges, and like the kill isn't worth it if it's not like a worthy opponent kind of a situation. And so it's like the trophies you want to get for him are trophies of like overcoming a greater opponent. And then like Nurgle is about, I think, death and like rebirth, but and like finality and stuff like that. Slanesh is mostly associated with like pleasure, but it's also, I think, like taking joy in things. So and it's like, that's where it leads down to like the dark side of that, is like the more you take joy in things, the less you get out of it. It's almost like being addicted to a drug, you know, the more you take it, the less you get from it. So you need to take more, or you want to, you know, mix it with other things to get that high again. That's kind of what Slanesh represents, from what I understand. I don't really know much about Tzeentch, other than I think he's like the god of like knowledge or something like that. So that's about all I really know about the chaos demons.
Many times before, we've discussed the.
Is it actually? Yeah, okay. So I can just do that to back up a little bit.
What? Like hard, Nick. So, as I've mentioned many times before, we've discussed the warp, the immaterium, the hellish landscape, the purgatory dimension realm between the material realm of our existence. Now, in the warp, it's terrifying, horrible. There are demons everywhere. Things are crazy.
And for humans, interstellar travel, like to go to places, you got to go through the warp. So that's what's the issue with that. And I guess psychers, you know, when they're doing their stuff, they're tapping into the warp, which is what makes them vulnerable to corruption.
Now, in the warp, it's terrifying, horrible. There are demons everywhere. Things are crazy. All your minds and thoughts and emotions get projected there. It is both formless and empty. It is vast and tiny. It obeys the laws of time and physics while simultaneously,
but at the same time, not.
Absolutely nothing of the sort. It is a hodgepodge and a culmination of just unknowable, eldritch, horrifying shit. And there are 4 gods that permeate in chaos and the warp. These are the 4 major chaos gods.
Right.
If we wish to learn about chaos, we need to learn about each and every single one of these chaos gods. First up, we have Khorne, and he is the easiest. Khorne is your classic Satan. He is all about anger, murder, fighting, blood, guts, death. You ever heard the term blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne? That's Khorne. The whole
classic
idea is that he is all about the fury and strength of battle. He doesn't care where blood comes from so long as blood is flowing. He wants to fight and murder and carnage and slaughter and death, 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 death. That is Khorne. Very simple to understand. Next up, you have Tzeentch, and Tzeentch is the god of change. However, the god of change, it's permeates in so many different other ways. He's the most eldritch of all the demon gods.
Most Lovecraftian,
he has this weird way to always be plucking at the strings of the universe. He's always conniving and scheming and doing his best to...
He's the guy that's like in the background trying to... He's like the puppet master playing things in the background. Okay.
Cause as much universe. He's always conniving and scheming and doing his best to cause as much little bullshit as he can. Tzeentch is unknowable. Everything that makes sense, he will and...
That is an interesting looking picture. Like, are those like eyes on the top of his face there? I can't really tell if those are eyes or those are like just some weird holes, and then eyes on his hands, and his upper torso is like a mouth opening up, and then he's got a mouth in his abdomen. That is an interesting... That's definitely very kind of Lovecraftian looking creature.
Shit as he can. Tzeentch is unknowable. Everything that makes sense, he will and won't do. Every future and setting and every type of destiny or fate is all foretold and also changeable. It is set in stone while also completely random. He knows what everything is going to happen and also that none of it's going to happen. You would ask Tzeentch a question. That question leads to 3 more questions. And those questions lead to the heat death of the universe, which asks 4 answers to those questions. And then he thinks to himself, what are questions even really? And are you even asking the questions? Or are you simply
Are eyes even real? Do we even see?
And other horse shit. Tzeentch is just, I'm gonna fuck with stuff. He is yes and he is no. He is the understanding and he is complexity. He is unknowable. And that's what the God of Change is about. Very bizarre. He likes birds a lot. I don't know why.
Yeah, I've noticed that. You know, I played Total War Warhammer 3, and a lot of the units for Tzeentch's faction is very kind of birdie, flyy looking things.
That's what the God of Change is about. Very bizarre. And he likes birds a lot. I don't know why. Next up, we got Papa Nurgle.
Big Papa Nurgle.
He loves you for who you are. Probably.
I know he's all about pestilence.
The same, but Papa Nurgle
plagues.
Is about rot, pestilence, death, and decay. He is the end of everything. Him and...
You know, I just thought about this actually. I wonder if the when the 40k lore was first being made, if the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is like what they took for these, you know, war, fame, and pestilence, and I forget what the last one is. War, famine, pestilence, not plagues, because plague is pestilence. I forget what the last one is. Death. It's death, right? It's war, famine, pestilence, and death. Those are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So I wonder if they kind of got like the idea for the 4 chaos gods from that. That just kind of hit me as he's talking about this.
Pestilence, death, and decay. He is the end of everything. Him and Tzeentch do not like each other very much because where Tzeentch represents change.
Yeah, I think most of the chaos, I think all the chaos gods don't really get along, right? They all kind of just fighting with each other. Like Khorne just likes to fight, so he'll fight whatever. But yeah, I don't think any of the chaos gods, I think they rarely get along and rarely do stuff together. You know, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
everything. Him and Tzeentch do not like each other very much because where Tzeentch represents change and adjustment, Nurgle represents stagnation and death. He is all about miasma and pestilence and large bloat and pus and organs.
Yummy.
People just being sedentary, sloth. He is the idea that everything will rot and decay and die. Nothing is certain besides decay and death. All of us will end up the same way, and broken down through just sheer never-ending decomposition. So the joke that Nurgle always loves you is generally because of that, because we all end up the same. We all rot, and we all die and wither. That's Nurgle, and he's got a general theme of course, pestilence and different
thick boys
and sickness and things of that nature. That's generally Nurgle. He's pretty easy to understand as well, and he chonk. Finally, we have the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that is Slaanesh, also known as the Prince of Pleasure or the God of Unspeakable Excess. Slaanesh is generally referred to with sex, but it's not only sex. It's just that's a good avenue if you want to make stuff.
That's like
Slaanesh is just
the way she grabs people
of the body being cranked to not just 11, but more like 17. See, we'll discuss Slaanesh a little bit more when we talk about the Eldar because they done fucked up, but she,
they did.
It or whatever is mainly about just the excess of emotions, and therefore sex is generally a large part of it.
That looks terrifying.
However, it's mostly pain and torture. Lots of pain, torture, but sometimes sexually related or drug related. Lots of drugs. Slaanesh gets off on everything. Extremes in happiness, extremes in sadness, extremes in pain and sadism and masochism. And of course that goes along with the sex part of it as well.
I mean, that makes sense, you know, everything to an excess. You know, it seems like where the universe might want balance, obviously she's the extreme of that. It is the extreme of that, and wanting, you know, the extreme in everything, the extreme in sadness and depression, the extreme in joy and love, the extreme in, you know, sexual pleasure and whatever. Okay, interesting.
And masochism, and of course that goes along with the sex part of it as well. It's generally referred to with sex because of the color scheme, very purple, lots of exposed genitalia. A lot of their models have like exposed nipples and stuff, and that is generally the theme you go for from a physical side, but it really embodies everything, mainly pain and also the excessive amounts of emotion. So when it comes down to it, you'll find a lot of them have things like spikes or whips or any kind of BDSM style gear because it is unspeakable excess. The Prince of Pleasure. Everything in excess.
They're the dominatrixes of the
frightening. That is
the demons
in a nutshell. A little bit bizarre and a little hard to describe sometimes, but as we talk more about the Dark Eldar later in this video, you'll understand it far, far better and far more than you'd want to. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone ever want to join Chaos? They all look horrifying, screwed up, and just...
I mean, like for power, right? Just the idea of power, you know, you're just a regular Joe Schmo and you're out here in this terrible universe that is the Warhammer 40k, you know, and life is shit, the universe is shit, you know, everything's dying around you, you know. One of the gods comes to you or whatever and promises you, you know, something better. Power or whatever, you know, pleasure with Slaanesh, the ability to change things, you know. I would think it'd be pretty obvious to be tempted and fall for the whims of, you know, any of the Chaos Gods, really.
Why would anyone ever want to join Chaos? They all look horrifying, screwed up, and just frightening things, right? Well, the thing is that, of course, one, your mind is put into the warp and the immaterium, so you can be easily swayed by chaos demons when they get into your head, especially if you're a psyker. Sometimes regiments of the less mentally strong people, whether they be civilians or, say, low-level guardsmen or conscripts, can be easily swayed by this and become chaos cultists and stuff, and they serve their dark gods and whatever god they personally prefer. However, and this might seem strange, chaos in their own right isn't necessarily evil.
Right.
See, the warp is every manifestation of emotion and being, every soul, everything of existence. This includes all the good things. All the different chaos gods have another side to their coin. Khorne.
So that's interesting. So when he's talking about the warp is essentially a manifestation of everyone's thoughts and feelings from the material plane, has there ever been any kind of lore or books or anything discussed what would happen, like a what-if scenario in the Warhammer 40k universe where, let's say, all of a sudden a war stopped and peace reigned and all the factions somehow, for whatever reason, got along and peace happened? You know, what would happen to the warp and the chaos gods then? You know, if all this killing stopped and yeah, you know, everything changed, you know, what would happen to the chaos demons? What would happen to the chaos gods and the warp? You know, how would that affect it? How would it change? Would they become more beings of light and hope and positivity, and would the demons turn to more like angelic creatures or something like that? You know, that's kind of interesting to think of. And yeah, I guess let me know, you know, in the comments if there's ever been anything written or thought of or theorized about any of that. As far as I know, there hasn't been, but that's an interesting thought that I had as he's talking here.
All the different chaos gods have another side to their coin. Khorne might be death, murder, slaughter, slaughter, but he's also got this weird sense of survival of the fittest, trial by combat, and honor. Khorne will never lie to you. Khorne will never stab you.
That's interesting.
Khorne isn't about conniving and scheming. Khorne is about straight up mano e mano, you versus me, get in the ring, we're gonna murder each other hard right now. It may not be a good thing at the end of the day, but it is that other side of the coin. Him and Tzeentch generally don't get along because Tzeentch is that conniving schemer, but he's also about the idea of hope. Where there is change, there is change for your predicament. There is change for your problem. The hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will.
So, and also talking about this, has there been anyone or anything notable in the 40k universe, any kind of event that happened where someone used the power of the chaos and the warp or anything like that to like actually really benefit like either the Imperium or do anything like really positive that actually had like a good positive effect on the universe? You know, let me know about that too, because it's interesting when he talks about, you know, hope, and Tzeentch is, you know, also the idea of hope and that things can change and things can be shitty and bad now, but there's always a possibility of it becoming better later. You know, that I guess that's also kind of, you know, a metaphor for the 40k universe as a whole, is like everything is shit now, but who knows what it could be at some point, or you know, what the possibility of things could be. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, let me know, has anyone like actually tapped in and used what would be considered the, you know, heretical evil powers of chaos and the warp to like do anything like good for Imperium and just anything good in general? I guess that would kind of be like based on the point of view of the faction, right? What could be good for one faction could be bad for another, I guess.
Problem, the hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will, the idea that your fate is not set in stone, but in reality that you control your own destiny and can control it whenever you want, the changer of ways. That is Tzeentch. And of course, Tzeentch and Nurgle hate each other because while Nurgle does represent stagnation, death, and decay, he also represents finality, an ending. The fact that you can be mentally at peace knowing that you will end and how you will end. Fear of the unknown, fear of change is not present.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, exactly. That will remove essentially the idea of the fear of not, you know, knowing that you're going to die and when you're going to die and how you're going to die. There is, I guess, kind of a sense of peace to that, and knowing that up until that point you can live how you want to live and do what you want to do and just enjoy yourself and enjoy life. I guess there, you could see that there could be an aspect of that, and interesting. Okay.
You will end and how you will end. Fear of the unknown, fear of change is not present with Nurgle. With Nurgle, everything will rot and die, and that provides that finality, that ability that this is over. We are all the same, and we will all end the same. We know the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to live and die and rot. And with that, it brings peace of mind. Slaanesh is a lot more simple. While they are the excess of emotion, they are also the representation of emotion. Slaanesh embodies happiness. Slaanesh embodies excitement and joy and pleasure, not only in the sense of the physical, you know,
Bam!
Style of pleasure, but also everything else like food and drink and air on your cheek and sunlight, the feeling, emotion and feeling. All of that is also represented with Slaanesh. So you have to ask, why are they always represented as super evil skulls and spikes on everything and want to murder everybody?
Because it looks cool.
I don't really got an answer for you on that one. My assumption is that because mentally humans may think worse thoughts, even if we don't act on them, and therefore they're projected in the warp more. That one's a little bit
I can see that.
I don't know. This is me spitballing right now, but I don't know. You need a super bad guy. You already got the Imperium of Man. You need somebody to be a little bit worse than them.
Right?
So you got demons. Honestly, who cares? I just want to buy like a bird magician.
Right. That's a sick looking mini, dude.
So combining all this together on the tabletop,
all of them are pretty dope.
Are generally very melee based. They run in, go really hard. You have lots of summoning and conjuring, tons of spells.
Yeah, I know from Warhammer, like Total War Warhammer, Khorne is the only real like demon faction that I've played so far, and that's just all melee based. It's all just getting into the enemy as quickly as possible and just murdering the fuck out of them. So I assume in 40k they all probably are pretty similar. Yeah.
Generally very melee based. They run in, go really hard. You have lots of summoning and conjuring, tons of spells. Generally a little bit frail, but they have special saves to make them a little bit stronger. You've got giant demons and smaller demons. You got hordes of little boys. And
yeah, Nurgle stuff's big chunky.
Demons are as they seem. Demons. Nurgle is slow. Khorne is super scary in melee. You've got Tzeentch, who are far more into psychers and spellcasting, and then Slaanesh, who is all melee, really fast but squishy, but in lots of hordes of tons of melee and pain damage, of course. So overall, the demons are a huge part of 40k and a massive threat to almost every—
I mean, yeah, right. So like, the Imperium is like the main faction, and then the Chaos Demons are kind of like basically the antithesis. They're like they're the antagonists, I guess, actually should be a better word. They're the driving like evil force mainly, you know, behind the Imperium and who they're fighting against. And because I mean, like I think even the Emperor himself, you know, it said like Chaos Demons is the greatest threat to humanity.
The demons are a huge part of 40k and a massive threat to almost every single faction with the exception of a couple. However, the big part about demons is also transferred into the other 9 Primarchs we didn't talk about, which are the Chaos Space Marines. So
okay, we're getting into more of these.
All the boys, all of them in the Primarchs, they have all also become Chaos Boys, and they all have their own special Chaos Legions, specializing in so many different things, just like the Adeptus Astartes, the Angels of Death, the regular Space Marines. Chaos Space Marines aren't a whole lot different than the regular Space Marines. They have the same armor, generally the same training and toughness. They just
bad boys.
In different kinds of things. And also a lot of the Primarchs have ascended into greater is it greater demons? They're demon Primarchs at this point.
Yeah, that is an interesting, I guess, question, I guess. Regular Primarchs, from what I understand, are extremely powerful. Really, in the Imperium, only second to, like, basically the Emperor and, you know, potentially other, you know, Primarchs. I don't know what the hierarchy of Primarch power level is overall on who would be considered, like, the strongest overall Primarch, if there is even one. I assume it's a situation where certain Primarchs are better at certain things than other ones are. Some are better strategists, some are better duelists, some, you know, are better at psyker, you know, stuff. But anyway, but it is an interesting question of, you know, when a Primarch turns, you know, to a Chaos, like, where are they at in the hierarchy, I guess, of demons? Because, like, Primarchs are able to take on some of the bigger demons by them, like, not necessarily like the Chaos Gods, but from what I understand, you know, Primarch's pretty up there, and they can take on some greater demons, you know, one-on-one and come out on top. So, like, having a Primarch that then gets infused with these demonic powers, I would assume would obviously take them to an even another level. So, that is kind of, I guess, an interesting question of where would they fit in the hierarchy of, like, demons.
Into greater is it greater demons? They're demon Primarchs at this point. Gigantic, horrifying man-demon hybrids that are pretty awesome, if I'm going to be honest. They look really cool. but them and their associated legions that they are a part of are all kind of going out there and causing a large ruckus for everyone else. Considering the raw strength and firepower of a legion of Space Marines, imagine that entire legion just converting to chaos and immediately fighting you.
That would be bad.
It's generally pretty horrifying.
It would be really bad.
Them, so
I could imagine there being a scene where you're just like a normal guardsman out there in the middle of fighting, and you see some Space Marines, you know, going out there fighting some demons, and all of a sudden they get converted and turned, and then they turn against you and they start coming at you. That would be terrible. That would be awful. Not something you'd want to have happen.
Converting to chaos and immediately fighting you. It's generally pretty horrifying. There's a lot of them, so I gotta write them down. But you've got the Emperor's Children with Primarch Fulgrim, loyal to Slanesh. These people, they are some messed up people. They're just sensory overload, tons of drugs,
I would bet.
Tons of torture. And I think Fulgrim is a demon Primarch right now, and oh god, I am terrified to see what that man looks like, at least on the tabletop, because Emperor's Children are not good people. You've got the Iron Warriors, which are kind of like opposite of the Imperial Fists, with Primarch Perturabo, I believe is his name. They're Chaos Undivided. They just kind of serve chaos in a general aspect instead of choosing one of the four. But the Iron Warriors are big on the siege and fortification, and they're basically entirely against the Imperial Fists and are a major rival. Perturabo, I believe, is also still alive, and I'm also very interested to see what he looks like, because Demon Primarchs are badass. You've got the Night Lords with Primarch Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz is dead, which is good because he's a sick fuck. But the Night Lords are generally about terrorizing people and terrorism. They're
about fear.
And rightly so. You've got the World Eaters with Primarch Angron.
That's sick looking.
Also excited to see.
Dude right there.
If you think you've known an angry person,
his name is Angron.
Angron is the angriest son of a bitch
you
will ever
his
know.
name is Angron for a reason.
Removed parts of his brain that didn't make him angry, so he could be angrier. Angron. Fucker's mad. You've got the Death Guard.
That sounds like, you know, taking a barbarian in D&D to the ultimate level of rage. You know, the Nurgle faction, like I said, this would be a faction that I would be, the Nurgle Chaos Space Marines sound like a faction that would be pretty interesting to play.
He could be angrier.
They'd be one of the ones I'd be interested to get into.
You've got the Death Guard with Primarch Mortarion. They actually have their own special codex and their own major army on the tabletop. Mortarion himself is actually one of the
That's a sick looking model, dude.
Look at him. It's so
that is dope.
Of course, Nurgle based, obviously. So very slow, but very tanky. You've got the Word Bearer.
Dude, I wish, like, I wish I had the funds that I could just, even if I never got into playing tabletop stuff, man, I would just love to have like these models, to have them just because they're dope. It's just sick.
With Primarch Lorgar. Lorgar is, I believe, still alive. I don't know what's up with him at the current moment, but the Word Bearers are generally the people who caused all the major problems in the beginning. At least I blame them for it. They're little assholes. You got the Black Legion with Primarch Horus. Get fucked, nerd. You've got the Alpha Legion with Primarch Alfarius Omegon.
Who everyone is Alfarius, you know. So many people leaving comments with the Alfarius meme. I love it. Thank you guys. It makes me laugh every time you guys comment about it.
Get fucked, nerd. You've got the Alpha Legion with Primarch Alfarius Omegon. Chaos, I think. And then finally, you've got the Thousand Sons with Primarch Magnus.
These guys would be someone that I'd be interested too.
Also have their own book, just like the Death Guard. Magnus is also a tabletop model.
That's a dope model.
Super cool, as you can tell. And they're all super heavily Psyker and kind of Egyptian themed. They look pretty neat. But overall, with...
Yeah, like I said before, I've always been like super into Egyptian, North, and Greek mythology. So like, I'm a sucker for anything that's kind of based around that kind of stuff.
All super heavily Psyker and kind of Egyptian themed. They look pretty neat. But overall, with all of these Chaos Space Marine factions, you can play as a lot of different ones, but the main ones that you can really work at are standard Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, as well as the Death Guard and Thousand Sons, as they are the most fleshed out, especially on the tabletop at least. See this right here? This is a really good way to describe the Chaos Space Marines. What the thick-headed fools with their broken corpse of an emperor fail to understand is that not only can they never defeat us, but they cannot hide or flee or shield themselves from the triumph of chaos. They are finite and we are unbound, undivided. They must not err, or they shall fall to heresy. All who fall join our cause. Every Imperial fool who dares to open his eyes is a willing recruit. They strive merely to hold back our fury and might, and it consumes them. Thus, you can see chaos is inevitable. We lurk not only beyond their grasp and at their gates, we lurk within the darkness of their souls, on the tip of their tongues, in their tortured dreams. We are them, but freed from the shackles of ignorance. We are them, grown strong, evolved. We are them, but so much more.
Damn.
As hardcore as that quote is, the saddest part is they're mostly right. Chaos is basically unkillable. You could probably get rid of Space Marines, a decent amount, the Chaos Space Marines that is, but every soul that dies goes to the warp.
Right.
Every Chaos soul will end up back in the warp. And depending on how hard you killed them, they will come back at some point. Every demon you banish.
Yeah, and again, I think that's why, you know, the Emperor had the foresight to say that, you know, the biggest threat to the Imperium and man is chaos, because every time you kill a demon, they just get banished back there, and they'll come back at some point in time, and everyone that dies, you know, their soul goes to the warp, and they turn into a demon too. So, like, no matter what you do, like, you could probably push it back and stem the warp to a certain, you could bottle it up to a certain degree and contain it to a certain degree, but you can never fully destroy it. And there's always going to be times where, you know, people will drop their guard and you'll have, like, incursions. So, again, it kind of goes back to my point of what I was talking about earlier, where, you know, because the warp and the material plane is a manifestation of, you know, the thoughts and feelings of everyone in the material plane, it's an interesting idea, and one, again, that I'm curious if anyone has ever gotten into in the 40k lore of what happens if they try to, you know, flip it around, instead of doing all the killing and whatnot, try to be, you know, peaceful and hopeful and, you know, positive, I guess. I know that's kind of like not 40k at all, but, you know, it's an interesting idea of what would happen to the chaos, you know, space, the warp, and chaos demons and all that, if that were to happen.
Will return at some point. Chaos is unstoppable. The warp is unending. And while maybe there is at some point some way to stop them somehow, the resources to do so, the requirements would be
astronomical,
are so far beyond the reaches of man and the other races at the current moment that really it's just an unstoppable force that just keeps on coming, and it's just barely being slowed. Chaos is by far the biggest threat. They are without number, their legions are everywhere, and yeah, they're pretty scary. So
I would say so.
We're done with humans now. Let's talk about some Xenos.
Okay, here we go. Let's get in the Eldar.
So let's talk about the Eldar, or also known as the Eldari, which are a super hyper-specialized and very technologically advanced race of, well, elf people. They were, as well, responsible for the creation of Slaanesh, the newest demon god. How'd they do that? Debauchery on a world-ending scale. See, back in the day, it was just Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle. And the Eldar are very, very ancient, millions of years. These Eldar, however, have a bit of a sensory problem. You know, every kind of pain or feeling that you have is a little bit amplified compared to the normal. However, with Eldar, as their race advanced so excessively, and they became so self-reliant, and everything became so easy, there was no requirement for food production anymore, there was no shortages, everything was basically done. Everyone was so comfortable, and that comfort breeded this weird sedation.
That is kind of an interesting thought of, like, yeah, what do you do when you have, like, not just as an individual, but as, like, a species, a race, where you just, like, all the challenges of, like, all the natural challenges of the world or the universe, whatever you want to call it, of, like, you've conquered them. You know, as far as I know, I think they were somewhat immortal. Like, they didn't die of, maybe I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, like, they didn't die of old age. They could still be killed, you know, from, you know, being murdered you know, whatever. But I don't think they really died from old age, which is one of the reasons why like they have trouble like reproducing, I think, because it's just how their species is. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm getting what I'm talking about here is some lore from something else that I'm, you know, crossing the streams with here with 40k. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but that is an interesting idea of like when you as like a species have like literally conquered like all the normal natural restrictions of the world of the universe, where, you know, food isn't an issue anymore, you know, energy isn't an issue anymore, you don't really have any more enemies, you know, you're able to go out and expand through space as you need to, disease isn't a problem anymore. Like, where do you go and what do you do, you know? It almost seems like it would kind of be like a natural state to kind of regress back into, I mean, I guess there would be two paths. Either just keep growing. Well, I mean, I guess there'd be multiple paths. You know, you grow, get into more spiritual and philosophical, you know, endeavors, get into more like artistry stuff, like, you know, the Renaissance period that we had, or regressing into you know, other states of, you know, being, getting into drugs and debauchery and all kinds of stuff like that.
Everyone was so comfortable, and that comfort breeded this weird sedation, and that sedation breeded the requirement for more and more debauchery.
Debauchery!
Debauchery! Debauchery! When everything you have can be so easily acquired, you will end up down this road of pure debauchery. All of the senses the Eldar had that were so powerful, things like feeling, happiness, sadness, and just evil and good, all needed to be satisfied and satiated. And the desire to satiate these senses grew more and more with worse and worse debauchery. It started off with,
yeah, that would, you know, the more you go down those roads, the less, you know, morality plays into anything too. So it just keeps like growing exponentially. I would get.
Grew more and more with worse and worse debauchery. It started off with things like sex and drugs becoming so much more rampant because these are the first things you generally turn to when requirements for living are so easily accessible. It would get to the point that made Sander Cohen in BioShock look sane. All right, this is the kind of debauchery it led to. It was constantly satisfying and satiating these sexual and sadistic or masochistic fantasies that only elevated and elevated. And this was species-wide. People started going down darker, more depraved, and more violent paths as time went on. However, some people didn't entirely take to that. Some of the Eldar were looking at this depraved species that they had become.
Interesting.
And said, no thanks for me, dog.
So they kind of had like a division, and I could see where that could lead to like civil wars and stuff like that too. Okay.
Good. And they bailed. These are the Craft World Eldar. They left on these giant continent-sized starships.
Continent-sized starships.
They believed in learning the old ways of the Eldar.
Can you just imagine having the technology to be able to create a starship the size of, you know, North America, South America, you know, Europe, Asia, Australia, any continent that we have? That's insane. That is insane.
Starships called Craft Worlds. They believed in learning the old ways of the Eldar and pushing away from this depravity and debauchery and going back to their main roots. And so they would segment themselves on these giant craft worlds far in the outer reaches of space. They even had this thing called the Webway. Remember what we mentioned about warp travel with the Imperium? Well, the Eldar had something way safer called a Webway.
Interesting.
And the Eldar Webway is actually like a pocket dimension kind of thing. And in that pocket dimension, there were also more horrible, depraved groups and clans that would spend their time in there. And if you imagine the debauchery was bad already, these were debauchery X10. So all of this...
Good Lord. Okay. So I guess that kind of answers the question that I had too, is like, You know, if they're such an old race, they're one of the older races, why didn't they ever really have to deal with chaos demons like the Imperium is? And I guess it's because they don't have to travel through the warp, you know, like humans do to get around. But they do have psychers, and psychers, unless they tap into some other kind of power, you know, psychically, wouldn't they still be vulnerable to chaos demons as well? You know, let me know about that.
It's continued, and it bloated until Slaanesh just burst forth. All that emotion, all that mental, well, thought processes, I suppose, all of this in such a condensed space. Don't forget, this is all being shot, all their souls as well, into the warp.
Right.
All of this depravity right into the warp. So what happened? Boom. Slaanesh was...
So, and again, goes back to what I was talking about. I'm kind of rehashing this again, but so, like, obviously all their bad things that they were doing focused into the warp created Slaanesh. So I would assume then the opposite could happen. If there was a race that did good things and were as positive as they could be for an extremely long time, I would assume then it would probably create some other kind of, you know, being. So, yeah.
Birthed and killed off 90% of the entire Eldar population.
90%.
Trillions had their souls.
This one event killed 90% of their race instantly. What the fuck, brother? Talk about fucking around and finding out.
Untold trillions.
That's like the theme of 40k, I think. Let's fuck around and find out.
And their actual fleshy bodies devoured by Slaanesh demons. The entirety of the Eldar race was eaten alive and their souls consumed to the Prince of Pleasure.
Jesus.
All of them got fucked up. It was
I would
so
say
bad
so.
that it literally ripped a warp hole into the fabric of the materium called the Eye of Terror. That's literally this like quasi horrifying gateway portal from the materium and the immaterium right next to Cadia. And it is horrifying. So this...
I don't know about Cadia at all, but I just find it a funny thing that he keeps like making that a meme.
Slaanesh, also known as She Who Thirsts by the Eldar, slaughtered the entire population except for a couple. Those in the craft worlds were actually not affected by this as they were so far in the reaches of the galaxy.
Interesting.
That crazy crack, that birth of Slaanesh only affected the ones in the center. So these craft world Eldar were able to escape, but Slaanesh got their sights on them. Every time an Eldar will die, their soul doesn't just pass into the warp naturally. It goes straight to Slaanesh, craft world or not. What about those people in the webway? Well, imagine...
So, and again, maybe I'm thinking of something else. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe, again, crossing lore streams from different things. But I thought I remember reading or hearing something that the Eldar have created some kind of way where when an Eldar dies, they can capture their soul and keep it from going to the warp. Or maybe that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to create something like that. Let me know if I'm wrong about that, if I'm thinking about something else, you know. But I thought I remembered hearing something that they've created some kind of device to prevent their souls from going to Slaanesh, and they're able to put their souls back in the, you know, bodies or whatever, and they're starting to like grow, and their numbers are growing. Essentially, their race is on the rise because of it. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know, let me know if I'm right or wrong about that.
Slaanesh, craft world or not. What about those people in the webway? Well, imagine that giant birth happening, but they were only able to just barely get a grasp onto you. Slaanesh was just barely able to hold on. These people are the Dark Eldar, or also known as the Drukhari.
The Dark Elves, okay.
Right now is so massively small. It is minuscule compared to any of the other most of the other populations in the universe. The Eldar are consistently having issues trying to get their population up because as their souls are constantly being hungered by from Slaanesh, they realize their entire species is doomed.
Right.
And they understand it very well. Since the time of the fall, our race has been haunted by what we, in our reckless pursuit of hedonistic indulgence, gave birth to. Though our dreams once overturned worlds and quenched suns, we are now but fitful
That's some
shadows
crazy
clinging
imagery.
to the edge of existence. All the stars in the sky cannot blot out the hateful glare of the red moon's eye. The birthing place of the great enemy pulses with all the malice of a demon that is dreaming, casting its shadow over all we have ever done and all we ever shall. Every twisted strand of fate and casting of the runes leads me to this time, to this place, and it is clear that the final battle awaits me at the ancient Crone worlds, a conflict the likes of which has not been seen since the Monkai warred amongst themselves and their corpse of a seer fell to his traitorous son. Is coming, and all my steps lead towards it, no matter that I walk other paths. I see the stars stained red with the blood of the Monkai, and though their wars do not concern me, I would gladly let them destroy one another. I know that to avoid this fight is to condemn my race to inevitable doom, and though all I see is darkness, I know that I will not flinch from my destiny.
Bam.
And now let's talk about cute plastic models.
Bro, I'm straight up not having a good time.
The first playable race we have for the Eldar are the Craft World Eldar and living in those Craft World starships I mentioned earlier. And each of them have their own kind of Craft World, almost like a Space Marine Legion. Each Craft World is in itself.
So yeah, there's different factions like the Space Marines.
The Eldar themselves
They all have their own flavor.
are very fast and rely a lot on trickery. They are squishy, a bit weak, but they're very in tune as psychers. Tons of psychers across the entire Eldar population, and their weaponry and abilities are fast and extremely hard hitting. But of course,
guerrilla tactics, sit and run.
Understanding an Eldar's
Get in, get out.
is an exercise in futility. They are all over the place in confusion and trickery on a whole galactic scale. They fight weird, they think weirder, and Eldar, in their own right, really rely on this to keep their species alive. They need to think about deception and the strangeness of what they do if they truly want to not be immediately murdered and slaughtered wholesale thanks to their entirely small population. However, I must say that it seems like their population is getting slightly better. These craft worlds hold millions upon millions of people. And as these
I mean, it's continent-sized ships, I would say so.
And have their craft worlds expand, losing a few people in battle, while hurts a lot, they aren't really losing what's extremely precious to them. It's not like every single death means the death of their species. It seems like they're kind of on the upturn a little bit. They're still a doomed race being sucked into Slaanesh every time someone dies, but they are definitely doing a little bit better than they were before. Eldar are fast, cunning, and what they don't make up for in tankiness, they make up for in extremely advanced weaponry. They also call humans Monkai, which is something I mentioned earlier. That is a derogatory slur for
I would say so.
In the Warhammer world. Why is it called Monkai? Well, it's because you can't
Sounds like monkey.
in your game call people monkeys.
Yep. Sounds like monkey.
Tabletop, exactly what I said. Not very tanky, generally pretty squishy, hit like trucks, and move at Mach 5. Fast, hit hard, die fast. Exactly.
Yeah, so guerrilla tactics, sit and run. Get into your damage, get out before anyone knows you were there.
Leave, only carry on. It is a message even a human can understand. Eldar. So, Drukhari. Let's talk about the Dark Eldar.
On today's episode of How Fucked Up Is Fucked Up. That's fucked up.
So those people I mentioned in the Webway, in the super deranged cults, and the
vampire elves,
the Eldar, in the Webway, they didn't quite get a hold onto them. So Slaanesh like has them, but it has them on like by the pinky finger. And they're slowly being consumed by Slaanesh, but they found out they can stave her off by doing Slaanesh things. The Dark Eldar are by far
so do what they already were doing, just more of it. That sounds like a bad idea.
And brutal race in all of Warhammer 40k.
Hold up, we're gonna back that up real quick.
Depraved, the worst, most horrifying, disgusting, depraved, and brutal race in all of Warhammer 40k.
Okay, so Warhammer 40k already has everything, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10 turned up to like 21. And if they're the most brutal, disgusting, depraved, horrifying race in 40k, that's saying something.
These are entirely a group of people whose full purpose to save their species from extinction, to go into planets, raid them, and take as many slaves as they possibly can to torture them for 1, 5, 10, 20, a million years, because that torture will keep them from dying. They look very BDSM style too. They definitely have a lot more spiky bits, and they have a lot more of that kind of
very
leathery,
dominatrix
black look to them. But let's say you are an upstanding Imperial citizen, living life on a regular planet. You get invaded by the Necrons. The Necrons will shoot you with a deatomizer, and you will be destroyed in a millisecond.
Right. And your molecules will be, you know, vaporized essentially. You'll be destroyed on an atomic level. So like literally you probably wouldn't feel a thing. You'd just be gone.
And that's it. Not the worst way to go. You are invaded by Chaos Marines or something. You take a bolter shot to the head or a chain sword across your stomach and you get cut in half. Painful, but not the worst. The Orks arrive. They beat you to death.
Not the worst.
Hurts, but, you know, whatever. Tyranids, they eat you alive. It's pretty rough.
That'd be awful.
The Dark Eldar. The Dark Eldar. This is going to get a little graphic.
I love the lower half thing.
I apologize. You pray you die. You don't. You are instead taken as a human slave. Your life will be endless work and agony, 24/7. They will make sure you can't not die, as your pain satisfies them. They will hook you up to all manner of torture devices. They will inject pain-based stimuli drugs directly into your nervous system. They will slowly run razor blades across your skin. They will fillet you and pull out your teeth and your fingernails one by one. They will remove your appendages and your skin and wait for it to grow back so they can do it again. They will murder and torture and use the R word, it rhymes with grape, your entire family in front of you and do the exact same thing to them. You yourself will also be rhymes with grape anywhere and everywhere possible. And this will occur for 20 years until you are no longer satisfying to them. And then you will be contorted, crushed, and twisted into some form of trophy. A fleshy trophy, or a ring, or a couch, or a TV stand, or perhaps a wonderful hat, while you are, of course, still alive and breathing. And you will become a moaning, fleshy trophy for eternity.
So what you're telling me is if I see Dark Eldar coming and I've got a bullet left in my gun, that's for me. That's what I'm getting from this.
And that is what happens when you are taken by the Dark Eldar. They are the most depraved, most
that sounds pretty fucking bad.
All of 40k. They look the part, and they do it so they all don't die. They are literally forced to do this, because if they don't, Slaanesh's grip will get harder, and they will have their souls pulled away. So long as they keep doing this, Slaanesh is like, "You're doing good, man. You're doing solid. You keep that shit up, you elf-eared bastards." That's the Dark Eldar. That's the Drukhari. They are horrible. On the tabletop, they're actually kind of like Eldar, but more extreme.
I would assume similar, yeah.
Squishier than the Eldar, but they hit generally even harder. Fast attacks, skirmishers, really quick, speedy, get around them, do a lot of damage, get away kind of stuff. That's most of the Dark Eldar. Look up the definition of grim dark in a dictionary. You'll find a picture of the Dark Eldar. And
sounds like it.
Public Commando. A quote from Mr. Vecht. "We are the lords of despair, masters of terror. Dread and agony are our meat and wine, and they are plentiful indeed."
Yummy.
Dark Eldar.
Yummy.
Talk about the Harlequins. Clowns.
Okay, I've never heard of them before.
Don't you want to have some fun?
The Harlequins are a bizarre race of Eldar. They're demonic clown performers. They're like a weird
this music
mix
is terrifying.
of Sander Cohen from BioShock and Jin from League of Legends, but in a more clown theme. They're artists of death and perfecters of their craft. They do not belong to Craft Worlds or any of the weird Drukhari people. They guard something called the Black Library, which is this giant tome of never-ending knowledge deep in the heart of the Eldar webway, and also guarded by their god named Kegorok, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Interesting.
He is the laughing god. But
they have their own other god. I mean, I assume that some of these races had other gods too, but I wonder how they compare to like the chaos gods as far as like power level and like influence and whatnot, if it's even like something similar.
God named Kegorok, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He is the laughing god, but it's the Eldar's laughing god, and these are the Harlequins, the Harlequin clowns. These are Eldar clowns. Okay, so imagine.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying times 10.
These depraved individuals would find funny, and this is the god of that. It's a horror clown. These are gods of horror for us normal people. For them, they're like, oh, it's so funny. They're all dying horribly. Honk, honk. They're very bizarre and difficult to describe. They've escaped the ruinous powers of Slaanesh somehow. But their main thing is guarding that black library. And the Harlequins just... They're demon clown performers. They're barely any models on the tabletop. They're good in melee.
Huh. So they're not as much of a tabletop faction as they are just kind of like a lore story faction.
To embrace the obscene virtues of chaos. For Slaanesh is nothing more than a manifestation of the Eldar mind in its most wild and unconstrained form. Human morality is meaningless to the Eldar, and to the dark side of the Eldar mind, all life is to be expended at a whim. Cruelty and generosity are but the impulse of a moment. Beauty and sensuality are virtues that can be expressed in bloodshed just as easily as in song. To an unfettered Eldar mind, there is neither sanity nor madness, but merely a wave of perfect existence fulfilled by its own savage momentum. They're very strange. Harlequins,
I mean, yeah.
Eldar,
anything like clown-based
that make humans
is freaky.
Completely easy to understand in comparison. They range from rekindling their civilization to horrifying murder and also clowns. They're all over the place, but honestly, they represent quite well and are rather interesting, especially with the whole Slaanesh murdering everyone bit. So, yeah, Eldar. Now, bugs.
Mom, they following me, Mom. They following me. The bugs.
The bugs.
The Tyranids. Now, you want to talk something a lot more fun, a little more simple than all this crazy Eldar shenanigans? Let's talk the Tyranids. They're bugs. Do they look like Zerg? Hell yeah, they look like Zerg. You want to know why they look like Zerg? Because they were actually supposed to be what Zerg were. Apparently StarCraft was supposed to be a 40k game in the beginning, hence why they look so much like Eldar, Zerg, and the Imperium of Man. Like, kind of Space Marine-y, those Marines, huh?
They're literally called Space Marines in the game.
Maybe. I don't know. You really fucked up on that one, Games Workshop, didn't ya?
Yeah.
Tyranids are a giant infestation of unfathomable proportions. These are giant, extremely bio-advanced hive mind organisms that are basically all about absorbing as much biomass as they possibly can to evolve and mutate to be extremely potent and powerful and kill and eat anything in their path. They are probably
consume and evolve.
The least evil faction in all of 40k because all they want to do is eat shit. They want to nom nom the entire galaxy. They hangry and we food. Also, this Tyranid hive mind has a presence in the
the other thing that I know about, I guess, I don't know if it's a true fact or if it's just like a theory, but I've read that supposedly it's possible that the entire rest of the universe has actually already been consumed by the Tyranids, and that our galaxy that we're in is like the last bastion of life beyond Tyranids. Because I guess they're invading from like literally all different points surrounding our galaxy. So I guess, you know, there's the theory or idea that everything else in the universe has already been consumed by the Tyranids, and this galaxy is it.
Warp. In fact, and we food. Also, this Tyranid hive mind has a presence in the warp. In fact, Tyranids in their own right.
Interesting. That's pretty interesting.
In the warp. They have a thing.
They have a presence in the warp, so like, because, you know, the warp is the materium, that's what the chaos gods are, so like, I don't know, that's just interesting. It makes me wonder. I don't know. That's just an interesting thought. that they have a connection to the warp? Are they a facet of some other kind of chaos being that, you know, maybe hasn't been known yet? Or yeah, I don't know. That just brings up some interesting thoughts.
Called the Shadow in the warp specifically, where when they are coming in to invade a planet, they have this weird ability to kind of cut off the warp on all the psychers
They
on
can
that planet.
cut off the
How
warp?
you get help across the stars? Well, you need
Yeah,
the warp.
you got to travel through the warp.
Stellar travel. So with people unable to call for help from the Tyranids, these are just easy pickings.
That's rough, man. So they just have a natural ability to cut off the warp. So you can't get reinforcements, and they make psychers useless. That's rough, dude. So, like, I guess the question would be, let's say you're on an Imperial ship and is travel through the warp like instantaneous, or is there actual like time you have to spend in the warp before you get there? You know, if you're traveling from point A to point B, is it instantaneous, or is it like, instead of it taking, you know, obviously, you know, hundreds of, you know, thousands of years or hundreds of years or however long it would take to get from, you know, one solar system to the next in you know, our galaxy, is it just like, you know, an hour or two? You know, if there is still like some kind of time delay in the warp, you know, what happens if you are traveling through the warp and you're going to a planet and all of a sudden that planet's being invaded by the Tyranids and they cut off access to it? Like, what happens to you? Where do you end up? Do you just like get shunt from the warp? Would you actually still make it there, or would it take you somewhere else, or would you just get stuck in the warp? Huh, that's interesting.
People unable to call for help from the Tyranids, these are just easy pickings. And an entire giant Tyranid hive fleet comes out of orbit and just will massacre, absorbing all that biomass and turning them and all of their other Tyranids into even more advanced monsters.
Yeah, I guess that also kind of brings up the question of how would you really defend against that? Because it's like, you would have to really know beforehand and be prepared for a Tyranid invasion. Because if they get like a surprise attack on you where they just invade a planet and you're unprepared for it, whatever's there is whatever's there, and they just have to fend for themselves, it seems like. That's a huge tactical advantage.
They come in so many varieties too, all based on what is important. Tiny little Ripper swarms for scouting and having little dudes eat people up, to the Hormigons, Termagants, and Gene Stealers, all the way to the Hive Guard and the Exocrines and the Swarm Lord, to Hive Tyrants and their giant battle fleets, and even something as crazy as the Hierophant Bio Titan. The Tyranids come in all forms and sizes.
I wonder what all types of Tyranid we're gonna fight in Space Marine 2. I'm very much looking forward to that game, but you know, I wonder, like, are we gonna have some crazy ass thing like this? You know, and are there like some of the various Tyranids gonna be like, you know, various kinds of bosses that we have to fight? I'm very curious to learn more about that game and to see what all kinds of Tyranids we are gonna fight.
Depending on what they require, they are extremely good at anti-biological weaponry. There is no way you can plague them or blight them. They have extremely strong armor, carapaces and such. Tyranids are nigh perfect organisms.
So, would the Tyranids then be like the perfect weapon to fight against like the Chaos Demons then? Because like any of Nurgle stuff would be ineffectual against it, right? Because they can't be... They wouldn't be subject to any of the pestilence, the disease, or any plagues like that. They couldn't get that and spread it. You know, so that's kind of an interesting thought too. You know, would they be the answer to stemming the tide of the Chaos Demons?
Carapaces and such. Tyranids are nigh...
If you could obviously like control them somehow.
Pretty spooky when it comes down to how they handle all of their genetic material.
They would be an interesting faction to play as, I think. The Tyranids would probably be a faction that I'd be interested to play. Also, mostly because I really enjoyed the Zerg in StarCraft 2. So I think I would be somewhat familiar, I guess, with how the Tyranids would play. Maybe, I don't know.
Comes down to how they handle all of their genetic material. Keep feeding them, they'll keep evolving. They keep on creating new horrifying organisms to spread across the galaxy. And you know what the most terrifying part of the Tyranids is? We might be surrounded. There have been like around 6 or 7 Tyranid hive fleets. Behemoth, Kronos, all these different kinds of hive fleets. And they've all arrived in the galaxy from different points. Different sections of the Milky Way galaxy have had different Tyranids come through. And that is horrifying.
It's terrifying.
As far as we know, we could just be surrounded on all sides by Tyranids. The only reason you may not hear a whole lot about Tyranids is because it's a little bit hard to have a bunch of story off of one hive mind.
I mean, yeah, I guess it would, like, you know, the thing that made the Zerg so interesting in StarCraft was the whole idea of Kerrigan, you know, and once the Overmind was destroyed in StarCraft 1, you know, the Zerg kind of split off in, I guess, somewhat different factions with different creatures kind of, you know, taking over. And then, you know, obviously Kerrigan was the Queen of Blades, and she kind of, you know, had to, I guess, reunite the Zerg race. But it was also technically at that point she kind of regained her humanity, thanks to you know, Raynor. So they were able essentially to put they were able to put humanity towards the Zerg and give the Zerg a face with Kerrigan. So I could see why it will be hard to kind of like really tell stories and get into a lot more lore stuff with the Tyranids, because to us they're just basically they're just giant bugs. They're just like an insect faction, which, you know, who knows what they would be thinking about. What, you know, our brains, we probably wouldn't even be able to really like comprehend what they, you know, think and what their goals and purposes are, and nor would they us. You know, we're just so alien to each other. So I could see why there might not necessarily be a ton of like stories, lore, or anything like that, you know, of the Tyranids or from the Tyranids perspective.
It's a little bit hard to have a bunch of story off of one hive mind genocidal monsters. All these giant bugs swarming in, killing and eating everybody and evolving. Oh, I mean, as cool as there are, there's some cool characters, the Swarm Lord, Old One Eye. You can't really have a whole bunch of major character-based stories around them. As awesome as they are, they're simple. They want to eat you. They want to eat you and absorb your biomass. They are simple bugs. Yep. If you want something a little more complex,
Eat and evolve.
Gene Stealer cults.
I can have all the pot I want.
Yeah, I know nothing about Gene Stealers at all.
Wherever I need a seat, I can just sit on my balls.
I've heard of them, but I don't know about what they are.
A brain of Tyranid that can slowly infect themselves into different kinds of society. And by infecting them, they can rise up to where they all pray and believe in these regular humans, pray and believe into their Tyranid hive mind gods.
So I guess the analogy that I'm thinking of, are they kind of like basically like the Terminators of the 40k universe? Because, you know, like the idea behind the Terminator is they're the perfect infiltrator to go in and carry out various assassination or disruption missions in the Terminator universe, because they were able to look like humans, breathe and bleed and everything, and take on human personalities. So like, is that kind of what the Gene Stealers are? Are they just like, you know, these creatures that can, you know, take on human personalities, traits and things to go in and disrupt society and you know, basically set things up for like a Tyranid invasion, or carry out assassinations, or to just, you know, turn populaces against humanity or to the Tyranid side? Kind of like how the Terminator analogy is the only one I could really think of. But
in these regular humans pray and believe into their Tyranid hive mind gods, and these brood lords, and I think they're called patriarchs, all can turn an entire world, all based into Gene Stealers, and these are called Gene Stealer cults. An entire hive world of the Imperium can be turned into nothing but servants to the Tyranid masters, just by infecting them and screwing with their genetic code a little bit. They also have this cool like Mad Max look, which is really neat. They are definitely
that's an interesting idea.
The Imperium, besides Chaos. I keep saying biggest threat to the Imperium. They're up there though, because you, dingus, stepped on a bug in middle school. asshole.
My
There
bad.
is a cancer eating at the Imperium. With each decade, it advances deeper, leaving drained, dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale, and all we can do is to try to stop the swarms of bioengineered monsters it unleashes upon us by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salvage our fears. We call it the Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us, it must know us as nothing but prey.
Only
Tyranids,
prey.
They're cool. But are they as cool as the orcs?
Every screen's gone red.
Daka Daka.
That means I'm super fast.
Orcs, 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 orcs. I fucking love orcs. So, yes, the green monsters, the green tide, the green skins. These orcs, they are in fact a race in 40k. The orcs are as exactly what you expect them. They have archaic weapons, they're big boys, they have axes, and they have got big old teeth, and they want to kill everything, and there are so many of them. The only reason they haven't taken over the entire galaxy is they can't stop murdering each other. Orcs are so cool. Orcs don't have philosophy. Orcs don't have existential crisis. What matters is who's the biggest orc. You listen
Who's
to that
the biggest
guy,
and who I gotta
he's
kill.
the biggest orc. He big orc knows best. You win through the power of imagination. Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the orc is the hardest to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic?
Like that, I think it's a World War II quote. I don't know who said it. It might not even be a World War II quote, but I want to say it is. That's how my brain is linking to it. But the idea of how does our enemy know what we're going to do when we don't know what we're going to do? Like, how can our enemy predict our movements when we don't know, what we're doing?
Each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic? As an orc, you're enjoying life. You're enjoying the life you're given. Your whole life and job and purpose is to get up and beat each other to death because you can. The biggest orc is the man who understands everything. He is the boss. And orcs have this really weird, like, big, dumb, stereotype British accent, which is just hilarious to me.
They're like the idea of like the British hooligan, like amplified to the max. From what I that's kind of like what the orcs seem to be in 40k.
Stereotype British accent, which is just hilarious to me. Those are orcs. You fight. You like to fight. Your whole purpose is to fight. You wage war because you want to wage war. You got your boss over there, and you better listen to the boss, because if you don't listen to the boss will squish you and make you an example for the other orcs, and then you can't fight because orc dead. And orc dead can't
Orc dead
fight
bad.
because orc dead. Orcs, they scrap together machines out of parts that don't make any sense, and because they believe, they have the mental imagination that that machine will run, it'll run. If
that to me is, I think, the most interesting thing about the orcs is their lore. Their literal canon lore is I believe, therefore it is. A man thinks, therefore he is. I think, therefore I am. That kind of quote. It's not, for like the idea for how like dumb and seemingly unintelligent the orcs are. The idea that they just like will things to happen and will things to work, their technology and whatnot. That to me is just hilarious.
they have the mental imagination that that machine will run, it'll run. If that machine's out of gas, you're driving that machine with your fellow orcs, and the biggest orc is behind the wheel, and you run out of gas, some orc behind you is like, oh, Zog, we're out of gas. And the big orc is like, no, we're not. I filled the fucking gas tank up earlier. And all the other orcs are like, oh yeah, you did do that. And then you turn the fucking mech back on, and it works again. Does it have gas? Probably not, but it works. The power of imagination. They paint things red because it makes them think they go
the more
faster.
you know.
They paint things purple because it's the sneakiest color. You want to know why? You ever seen a purple orc? Didn't fucking think so. Orcs are also like ancient as hell. They're back in the Eldari time frame. But
oh, that's
they
interesting.
Orcs, and they were much larger and scarier and far more intelligent. Now they're just orcs.
That's actually very interesting. So they're as old as the Eldar, and they used to be bigger, stronger, and more intelligent than they are now. So, like, what happened to de-evolve them, I guess? Or what happened to regress them so that they're smaller, not as strong, but also, like, not very intelligent? I wonder what happened to do that.
And they're big, dumb, and they smack things, but they're pretty spooky. They're not very well armored, but they hit really hard, and it's called the Green Tide because there are so many orcs. There are about as many orcs as there are Tyranids, maybe more.
Really?
But they keep on, murdering each other, so it's not too bad.
Really? That's something that I didn't know. I didn't know the orcs were like I thought, as far as things went, the Tyranids, like, they were like the biggest numbered race because of just how they are, like they're just this giant, swarm of various bugs consuming everything. I didn't know the orcs were along that line too. That's crazy. So, like, literally the only thing that's keeping the orcs from just taking over is them keeping themselves in check, essentially, by fighting amongst themselves. If they were ever, like, truly united and had, under one true banner and had one purpose, they would just take over the universe. That's interesting.
Maybe more. Who knows? But they keep on, murdering each other, so it's not too bad of an issue. Orcs are entirely comic relief. Their stuff is slapped together. That makes no sense. Their vehicles don't work the way they're supposed to, but they work because they think it works, because they
That's hilarious.
That it works.
That's funny to me.
Orcs care only about who is the biggest orc, and they will follow the biggest orc. And then if they want to be the biggest orc, they'll challenge the biggest orc. And then when they go and they issue a WA is just war in orc, they murder everybody and everything in this giant tide of green orcs who are just excited to be hitting something. They don't care.
So are goblins considered orc in the 40k universe? Are they like part of the orc race? Are they a sub-faction of orcs? Or are they just like orcs? Was they just considered orcs and they're just like little orcs?
That they're hitting Eldar or the Imperium or Tau or anyone in between. They're just so they get to beat shit up. That's orcs. And on the tabletop, they are a total coin flip, and they're really fun. I have never met a salty orc player. I have never met someone who plays orcs and is ever just a bad guy or that guy. Orc players have this kind of fun to them because when you play them, you are completely submitting yourself to RNG. So here's...
Okay. I don't know if I would like the orcs then. I mean, it might be fun to play them every now and then, but I would assume in a tournament situation, the orcs are not played very much because of RNG. I personally, in a lot of games, hate RNG and stuff. I don't know, the only thing I can really kind of compare it to, I guess, would be like card games like Hearthstone. I just can't, like, you could have like a really great deck, in a lot of those games, and it doesn't matter because you're just getting shitty draws over and over and over again. And like, it doesn't matter how good of a deck you have or how well you play or how well you strategize and do things. You just lose because you had shitty draws, just bad RNG. Stuff like that annoys the shit out of me. So I don't know if I would enjoy playing the orcs very much. It would be something where I would just like, sure, whatever, let's just have a fun game, and then I'd play the orcs. On the flip side of that, I guess, talking about tournament stuff, briefly, I guess let me know what races played mostly in tournaments, and, what race, I guess, if someone knows those stats in tournament play, what races played, what races are played the most, and I guess what race is overall the most winning race, if anyone knows that. I'd be interested to learn that.
A bad guy or that guy. Orc players have this kind of fun to them because when you play them, you are completely submitting yourself to RNG. So here's the thing. Guardsmen, Imperial Guardsmen, when they shoot, they roll a dice, and on a 4 up, they'll hit their target. They have a 50% chance.
Yeah, I don't know any of these rules for the tabletop at all, so this is actually kind of interesting for me to learn.
They shoot, they roll a dice, and on a 4 up, they'll hit their target. They have a 50% chance. Space Marines, pretty good. They hit on a 3 or higher because they're well trained. Adeptus Custodians, they hit on 2s because they're just super well trained. Orcs, they hit on a 5 or higher. But if they roll a 6, they get to make another shot with anything. From the dinkiest pistol to the biggest rocket launcher.
Interesting.
It doesn't matter. Half of their stuff will blow up on a whim. One of their medics, if you...
Okay, so the orcs are kind of a situation. It's just a super high risk reward RNG situation where if you're rolling real hot, you're just gonna swarm. You're just gonna swarm shit. You're just gonna roll over everything, and there's nothing the enemy can really do about it. But if you're rolling really bad, you're just gonna get stomped. It's one or the other. Okay, that's interesting. I could see how in a situation where it's just like a game for fun, that could be fun to play. But in a tournament situation, again, I could see that like not being a race you would want to play. Okay.
Half of their stuff will blow up on a whim. One of their medics, if you roll a 1 to heal someone, you fuck up your surgery and you just kill an orc.
I would bet.
Wacky and silly.
Interesting.
But the thing is if you roll well, you roll high, and you keep rolling high, you are going to crush people. And if you don't, you lose. I mean, that's what you get when you play orcs. That's what happens when you play orcs. It's a coin flip, which is why you can't be a salty bitch when you play orcs, because...
Yeah, it's just, when you play orcs, you go into the game knowing that you're just there to have fun. And whatever happens, happens. You don't really care. It's not about winning or losing, it's just about having fun at that point. I could see that being enjoyable. Again, something to do every now and then is just a for fun game.
It's a coin flip, which is why you can't be a salty bitch when you play orcs, because things won't go your way. It's just the roll of the dice. You're playing a dice game. But if you're gonna have fun, and you want to be stupid, and you want to be silly, you're gonna play some damn orcs. But on the opposite side of the fun part of this, let's talk about
the Necrons are the race I'm most interested in. The Doom music.
The Necrons are spooky, scary skeletons and very grimdark again. They have a much more fleshed out lore than before. Back in the day, they were just undead Egyptian space terminators, and they still look that way, but they actually have a story.
They look pretty dope.
Way back in the day, you had the Necron tier. Kind of see a theme here: Eldari, Eldar, Krork, Ork, Necron, Necron tier. So the Necron tier were this race of generally kind of shitty people. Not because they were personally shitty, because their lives were awful. They were ill-fated to a horrible existence of like radiation and a terrible planet they lived on, and everything just really sucked. Being a Necron tier was just really depressing. They really were looking for immortality. They were extremely reliant on the hope that they would eventually find the key to living forever and just stave off this horrible nature that they were thrust upon them, and therefore they could become the most dominant race in the galaxy. And they found this group. They're called the Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in...
Yeah, I think weren't the Old Ones basically like the creator race that kind of created like most life in the universe, most of the races and stuff like that? Correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand of some of the lore, like, yeah, they were like the first race and they created most of the other races.
Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in StarCraft, right? These Old Ones were these strong, pretty much omnipotent beings, and they, of course, knew the key to immortality. So the Necrons went to them and said, please, show us your ways. And the Old Ones said, piss off. Not really, they were a lot more humble about it, but they did not want to share their secret of immortality with the Necrons. The Necrons, of course, took this very well and waged war with them. Yeah. Kind of under this united banner. The Necron different dynasties didn't really like each other, but under
like all that looks dope.
The Silent King, he thought the best way to unite his race.
The Necrons would probably be a race that I'd be interested in playing on the tabletop, or at least learning more about them.
The secret of immortality to them. This was known as the War in Heaven, and this is actually like a multi-stage war, because during this War in Heaven, they discovered the star.
Now, would this, I guess, in the 40k lore, would this be considered like the first real, like, war that happened in the 40k universe? You know? I guess let me know, because, I mean, this happened way back in the early days of, you know, the 40k, you know, universe foundings, you know, from what I understand. So like, is this like the first, I guess, maybe not the first war, but like the first, I guess, like great war that, you know, impacted a lot of things in the universe?
A multi-stage war. Because during this war in heaven, they discovered the star gods, a whole new race of people known as the Catan, or the Catan. These star gods were also very much like old ones, almost omnipotent beings, and they too had the key to immortality.
Interesting.
And so the Necrons went to them and said, hey, can you help us fight off the old ones? Can you help us kill these old ones, you, the Catan? And the Catan said yes. And in fact, we can help provide you with the immortality you so desperately seek. So the Silent King of the Necrons decided to make a pact with the Catan to allow them to accept this generous gift of immortality upon them. But this, of course, had been a horrendous
Of course,
trap,
there's always
and
a price to pay.
Necrons were dragged in chains to this biotransference where their flesh was stripped from them, replaced with nothing but a metal hollow shell, as their souls were ripped from their body and fed to the
Interesting.
Catan. And the Catan fattened up. They got chonk on the soul.
So these Catan, so are the Necrons like, was just their consciousness transferred into these Terminator-esque bodies, and they don't have, are they like soulless creatures now? They're just like these almost kind of, you know, undead robotic creatures without a soul now? Or and the Catan, like, you know, feasted on their souls, or do they still have a soul, kind of a situation? I guess let me know.
The Catan fattened up. They got chonk on the souls of the Necrons. As this was their plan all along, they consumed the flesh and souls of the Necron tier and turned them all into unwilling robotic slaves.
Interesting.
Just to serve their will. And then, with their new-founded Necron army, they pointed their guns at the old ones, and the Catan continued their domination of the stars and their genocide, complete and full genocide of these old ones. The old ones did their best to stave it off. They even created other races, the Eldari and the Orks, to try to fight off.
So yeah, so the old ones, yeah, they created the Orc and the Eldar specifically to fight the Necrons and the Catan. Okay. That's interesting.
The horrifying Necron army and the Catan above them, but there was absolutely no possible chance for them. And the old ones were absolutely extinguished across the galaxy. Their entire race completely removed. Full-on 100% genocide. However, during all this, the Catan, so just infatuated with their victory, started fighting each other for fun, for sport, and for small differences.
As
doesn't
races
matter.
always end up doing.
With these overpowered people, they're going to eventually hit each other at some point.
Right.
And as they began just menially fighting each other, the Eldari and the Orks actually started pushing on the Catan's borders a little bit, giving them a little bit of a run for their money. And as this continued, this is when the Silent King, who retained his consciousness, decided to leap into action and start a full-scale revolt against their Catan masters. And this revolt was bloody, as the entire Necron army was surged off to destroy these star gods. They were able to, just after suffering horrendous losses, were able to turn the tide of the war. And they took these Catan and they blasted them, because as these star gods are unkillable, they were able to break them into thousands of shards and entrap them in giant stasis vaults to now actually be slaves to the Necrons. And with the Necrons having the entirety of their old gods enslaved to them, they realized that soon their race was about to be...
I mean, I guess that's karma, you know?
New races, the Eldari and the Orks. And so what they did is they retreated into giant stasis tombs in order to preserve their energy and their strength for when one day they would be reawakened and they would be able to rule the galaxy that was rightfully theirs. And then some dingus Adeptus Mechanicus guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back, and
Can you imagine being that guy going back to the Imperium and be like, hey guys, got a bit of news, a little more bad news. You know, I know we're fighting the Chaos Demons, and we got the Tyranids, and we got the Eldar, and we got Chaos Space Marines, and you know, we got all these things we're fighting, and you know, I may have accidentally woken up these ancient, you know, aliens that are bent on genocide and whatnot. I mean, it's a little, it's a minor, it's a little thing. It's, you know, they're called Necrons or something. I don't know. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. But I just, you know, I figured I'd let y'all know. Yeah, it's whatever.
This guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back, and they see all these primitive races on their lawns, and they think, get the fuck off of it. The Necrons are back, super advanced, and they are here to reclaim the galaxy that they so rightfully
they seem like a race that I'd be interested to learn more about, to play them on the tabletop.
Undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die,
again, like anything Norse, Greek, Egyptian, mythologically related or anything like that, I'm a sucker for. So, you know, they're Egyptian-based, you know, Terminators, dude. Egyptian-themed Terminators. Like, how badass is that? Space Egyptian Terminators. I'd be down. I would want to learn more about them and how they play, you know, to play them on the tabletop.
They're a lot like that. Tons of undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die, they just get right back up because they keep on reanimating. Hard to kill, tons of crazy stuff. You can use the Catan themselves as units.
Oh, really?
It's pretty cool. The Necrons are one of the three major events in 40k. The Horus Heresy, the Fall of the Eldar, and the Awakening of the Necrons are all pretty
interesting.
Events. And the Necrons themselves are pretty dang cool as well. Here's a good quote from a wonderful Dawn of War game. Lucky creatures, as long last you have found the tranquility of death. I was like you once, clinging to life and blind to the truth. When I uncovered the truth, I too shuddered and paled with fear. Deep in these catacombs, I was remade. Here, my brethren slumbered for eons while the living grew like weed. My Lord knew this day would come. He had plans for us all. We would purge this world once more. So come, poor victims of life.
Poor victims of life.
Tranquility in these crypts. Kronos will be a tomb world once more. Necrons.
Poor victims of life. Jesus.
Especially a little dickhead. But speaking of dickheads, last race. Let's talk.
Okay, we're on. This is the. I think this is the Tau, right? Yeah.
The exact formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, in the 40k world that is, some Imperial navigation vessels were going around through different areas, and they saw a primitive race, blue people, smacking each other with sticks and stones. And they thought, dumb Xenos race, who gives a shit, and they bailed. Then this giant warp storm occurred right in that major area, unable to be breached. Then, once that warp storm 6,000 years later subsided, hello, those little sticks. Well, they decided to actually have no war of any kind and all just unite together under one flag of the Tau Empire. And now they have gigantic starships and Gundam robots and lasers and railguns and mechs. And
so they're like a super mechanized faction.
Good. That is generally the Tau Empire. They have this kind of feeling of this homogenous group. All species can go underneath the banner of the greater good. The greater good is their idea of the fundamental increase and help of all. In fact, they are most likely the most like the Covenant in Halo, where they have the overarching prophets, being the ethereals, who are actually kind of dicks and like to...
I mean, who isn't a dick in 40k?
A little bit, but then you have all these different races directly underneath them, and they all work together in this big group as this large, foreboding race that tries to spread their weirdly pseudo-religious influence across the galaxy.
They almost kind of sound like 40k's version of the Federation from Star Trek. Like, you know, if you were to take, like, the ideals of, you know, Star Trek, obviously, is to bold to go where no one's gone before and, you know, to seek out new life and new civilizations and to learn and, you know, to have that, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess almost not symbiote. I don't know. I can't think of the word that I'm searching for in my brain. I'm having a brain fart here, but just that relationship with other races of understanding and coexistence, I guess. This is like the 40k version of them, where like they're cool to an extent. If you're willing to join them, they'll take you in and, you know, take the best parts of your race, and you will serve what they call the greater good, you know. And it only enhances them more, I guess. So yeah, it kind of sounds like a twisted 40k version of like the Star Trek Federation, if you will. That's where my mind goes anyway.
To spread their weirdly pseudo-religious influence across the galaxy. The alien is not intrinsically evil. Do not hate him. Pity him, his ignorance. Seek to understand his differences and equate him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good.
But yeah, it's almost like they see other alien races as less than, but they're not necessarily to be destroyed. They're to be uplifted and to be brought into the whole. So again, it's kind of like where my mind goes, it's kind of a twisted 40k version of like the Federation Charter of, you know, seeking out new civilizations to learn and incorporate into them and their greater good and greater being. So that's where I get anyway.
Inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good. That is generally the Tau. And if you're kind of wondering like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have,
which I would, that to me, like the mech stuff's kind of cool. Like I've always, like, you know, recently Armored Core came out. That was a really good game, and you know, there's some, you know, Gundam anime stuff, but there hasn't really been a whole lot of like mech stuff, other than like Mech Warrior, really, that I can think of that has really kind of gone like mainstream. So it's interesting that they kind of have created this kind of technologically mechanized based race in 40k. It almost kind of feels like it doesn't really fit, right?
like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have laser rifles and rail guns. They got giant mechs.
They pew pew.
Tons of missile pods.
That's dope looking.
Heavy rail rifles and rail guns, and burst cannons and ion accelerators and void shields and all this stuff. And that is generally what the Tau's all about. But you're probably thinking, Bricky, this doesn't sound that evil. This doesn't sound very grim, dark Warhammer. And you'd be right. The Tau Empire really don't have that much of a horrifying, grim, dark style like everybody else. They're much more younger, new age thing. In fact, they're probably
haven't been corrupted yet.
Less evil and a lot even better than they are now back in the day, because they liked having like that good guy faction. But a lot of us who really like the dark, depressing style of Warhammer didn't really like it that much. So, see, the Tau get a lot of hate, and a lot of that hate isn't necessarily unjustified. It's mainly from a tabletop perspective, but as you can see from all the visuals I've shown you recently, they don't really fit in the 40k universe very well. They lack that super dark, dramatic, kind of high gothic level the Imperium has. They don't have the weird kind of like grungy stuff that Chaos or say the Orks do. And the Necrons and the Eldar have their own specific style as well. The Tau really do look like something out of Gundam. And while it isn't necessarily a bad
I love the anime lower half little thing he's got going on there, dude.
thing, it does definitely not fit too well. There's that. There's also the tabletop problem. In tabletop, Tau are horrible at melee combat, but exceptionally good at range combat. So they blast everyone from really, really far away, and they have a million rules to make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat.
Okay, so they're considered like the cheap faction, where they can just sit back and pew pew, and there's nothing you can really do about it. I could see where that could be frustrating. So I guess a question would be, what matchups would be good against them? Would the like Imperial Army be good against them? Because the Imperial Army has got a bunch of artillery and tanks and stuff like that, and other range units. So like, would the Imperial Army be a pretty good matchup against the Tau, since they can kind of maybe go toe-to-toe at range with them? I would assume Tyranids would probably be bad. A lot of Chaos stuff would probably be bad against them, you know? maybe Space Marines, some of the Space Marines factions, maybe the Scar, is it the Scar one or whatever? The more cavalry-based Space Marine faction that's kind of like Mongolian themed. Maybe they'd be decent because they could actually, you know, get in close quickly. They could close the distance quick enough to be able to do it. You know, I don't know. But I guess, yeah, just let me know what kind of, I guess, factions might be decent matchups against them in the tabletop. That'd be something I'd be interested to learn.
To make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat. So it basically just forces you to bottleneck the game into one specific gameplay style, which is gun to gun. And if you're doing gun to gun, they're going to win every time because they're the Tau, and the Tau are really damn good at shooting. So it's one of those things that make the Tau generally rather hated, and a lot of different reasons for that, both from style and such. But this is actually one of the things I wanted to end this video with, is that the Tau, while they have their issues, you should not be discouraged from playing them. I'll make plenty of Tau weeaboo jokes, of course I will, but it's all generally in good fun. Anyone who legitimately doesn't want you to play a faction is an idiot, and you shouldn't be giving them the time of day. You pick what you think is cool and what you like. In Warhammer, especially now, factions get better and they get worse. They grow and
yeah,
they fall.
That's how things always happen. Balance changes.
You like the look, you like the models. If you're talking tabletop, that is what you should be going for every time, is what you think is badass, because things change all the time. But the universe of Warhammer has so much going for it. Every faction has something interesting, every character has a story, and there's a million stories to be told. The universe is vast and exciting, and while it is dark, depressing, and horrible, that is the damn charm. And out of everything I've told you in these two videos, is anything you could take away is the reason why so many of us are so into this series and why we like it so much. Because with so much variety, such an expansive universe, and so much that can be done, you can find yourself having a pretty great time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it.
Thank you so much for making the video.
More of me, Bricky. You have Twitch.
Go follow them on all the things.
For my streams. You have my merchandise site, in which I was wearing all of my merch, but underneath this, because I had to wear this so it wasn't black or white for the green screen, which is a little unfortunate, but it's fine. If you'd like to see merch, it is in the description. Also, if you'd like to support me on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Bricky for more videos like this, then that would also be wonderful. So Twitch, merch, Patreon, anything if you want to support, that would be fantastic. I'd appreciate it. If not, I'm just stoked you got all the way to the end of the video, and that is enough for me. So we're going to be having some more content like this out in the future. Thank you so much for sticking around this long and being with me through this pretty rough time. That's, I think, all I got. Also, before I go, let me leave you with my favorite Warhammer quote. He who scoffs at the power of the las gun has never ran through a field of 1,000 of them.
That's a pretty good quote, actually.
Bye-bye.
Pretty good quote, actually. All right. Well, great video. Great video by Bricky. Thank you very much for making the video, Bricky. If you happen to see my reaction at some point in time, appreciate it. That's Bricky's Every Single Warhammer 40k Faction Explained Part 2. Very good and informative video, going into a lot of the Xenos, you know, a lot of the alien races and into the Chaos Demons. Definitely learned a lot more than what I thought, you know, about a lot of the races. I mean, the Tyranids, there's not necessarily a ton to the Tyranids, although I didn't know really anything about the Gene Stealers at all. But I mean, the Tyranids at their base, basically, you know, they're like the Zerg from StarCraft. If you played StarCraft, then you kind of know what the Tyranids are. They're all about, you know, eating and evolving, consuming and evolving and becoming greater, and just, yeah, that's it. The Tau, I didn't really know much about, but like I said, they sound kind of like the 40k's twisted version of the Federation from Star Trek, willing to go the diplomatic route and including alien races. Like the quote he said is you know, the alien isn't intrinsically evil, you know, you should pity them. And I'm paraphrasing, I know, because I don't remember the exact quote, but basically you should pity them because they don't know their ignorance, and you need to lift them up and include them for the greater good. So it's kind of like, yeah, the Warhammer, my mind goes Warhammer's version of Star Trek Federation. So And they sound like they are annoying on the tabletop. The Necrons sound like I want to learn more about the Necrons. Obviously, he says, you know, the three major events are, you know, the Slaanesh's birth, the Necron reawakening, and the Horus Heresy. So I would want to learn more about the Necrons and how they play. They seem like a cool race, and they'd be one that would be interesting learning more about to play on the tabletop. It would probably be between from the races he talked about here in this video, as far as tabletop stuff goes. It'd probably be either the Tyranids or Necrons that I'd be the most interested in playing. The Eldar lore is very interesting. The idea that they created Slaanesh and that 90% of their race was annihilated in that one event. That's crazy. That is insane. And then how just terrible the dark elves are, the Drakari. Like, when you sit there and you say that one particular race of people are the most vile, evil, debaucherous, disgusting, and terrible people in the 40k universe, I mean, I guess someone has to take it, but like, that's bad. That is bad. It's definitely a situation where it's like, you see a bunch of Dark Eldar coming at you and you got, you know, a couple bullets left. You're gonna save those for yourself. You know what I mean? The Chaos, you know, demons and stuff like that, I knew a decent amount about them, and it was interesting to hear a little bit more about them. And yeah, you know, the whole dual nature where, you know, like Khorne is about murder, death, kill, murder, death, kill, you know, 187. But he's also about doing it with, you know, an honor. He won't lie to you, he won't stab you in the back. You know, Tzeentch is about change, but also hope. Slaanesh is about, you know, pleasure, but also joy, you know. I feel like Slaanesh is about, you know, basically addiction is really kind of where Slaanesh comes from. And then, you know, Nurgle is about, you know, death and pestilence and finality. So it was very interesting to get into all of those and learn a bit more about them. But, the Harlequins are something that I didn't know about either, and they sound like a very weird. It just sounds like they're Eldar clowns. They're Eldar clowns that can be almost as bad, if not maybe even worse than Drakari. And they have their own god, and that would be something I would be interested to learn more about too. Is what is that god about? And I guess if it's somehow comparable to other Chaos gods, like how comparable is it, and like what kind of power scale are we talking about here, you know, as far as those things kind of go. And the lore of the Necrons with, you know, the war in heaven and them fighting the old gods who sound like they were kind of like the creator gods that created most life in the universe or something like that. I could be wrong, but you know, they created the Ork and the Eldar. You know, that whole stuff would be something that I'd be interested to learn more about and read about. That's very interesting. It's also interesting to me that the Orks were once bigger, stronger, and more intelligent than they are, and that they've kind of regressed over time. So I would be interested to learn more about that and what happened to them, if there is anything written about that, you know, what happened to them to make them kind of regress to where they are now. But it's also interesting to know that their number is potentially equal to, if not greater than, the Tyranid numbers, and that really the only thing that's keeping the Orks from literally taking over the universe is the fact that they just fight against each other. But I also think it's absolutely hilarious that their technology works just because they will it to work. Like, they just believe it works, so it does. I think that's absolutely hilarious. For, you know, that's like so the opposite of what their race really is. Like, they're so like I said, they're kind of like the idea of like the hooligan, like taken to another level, you know, turned up to the 40k level. And they're just, you know, these not very intelligent creatures, but they have this power to manifest things to work. And so I wonder, like, where does that come from? Is that like a psyker kind of thing? Is that something that they were inherently given, you know, from the old gods or whatever? But That's all interesting. So very interesting, very informative video. Definitely learned a lot. Very good video. Thank you, Bricky, for watching this. You should definitely go over and follow Bricky on all his things. You know, he's got a Twitch channel, Patreon, obviously his YouTube channel. I'm going to link this video and his YouTube channel down in the description below, so you can go over there and check him out. So yeah, very great video. Thank you for making it. And like he said, guys, if you're still watching here to the very end, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I've had a lot of love and a lot of support on the channel lately for a lot of these Warhammer 40k reactions, so I definitely want to do some more. So if you have any videos from other creators or anything else that you would like me to take a look at and react to, just let me know down in the comments. I'm thinking about doing like a community game night for like Warhammer Darktide. So if anyone out there has Darktide and we're interested in playing, I play on PC. I believe there's crossplay with at least the Xbox from PC, but I'm not 100% sure. It's something that I would have to check out on. But I'd be interested in doing like a community game night, you know, just one night, you know, maybe on a weekend or something like that, or Friday or Saturday night at some point in time, where we can just chill out and get in my Discord, and you know, whoever wants to play, we can just come in and play some Darktide and just run around and have fun. So if that's something you guys be interested in, let me know. I will probably set up a poll for that on my YouTube page, just to gauge if there's any interest in doing that or not. So yeah, look for that. But again, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate all the love and support. Appreciate you guys watching this video. And if you are still watching to the end, I just can't thank you guys enough. You know, if you liked the video, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it definitely helps me out and helps me grow. And I hope wherever you guys are and whenever you're watching this, that you're having a wonderful, wonderful day. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one.